Hello fellow scholars, welcome to the Ripe Good Scholar YouTube channel. My name is Sarah. Today we're starting our journey through one of Shakespeare's most popular plays, A Midsummer Night's Dream. This light-hearted comedy is full of magic, fairies, love, and crazy mix-ups. It's a great introduction to Shakespeare because it shows the breadth of his writing through a plot that's pretty easy to follow. The story takes place in ancient Greece, the city of Athens to be precise, where the Duke, Theseus, is preparing to marry Hippolyta, Queen of the Amazons. This is not the primary plot, though. For that, we have to follow Lysander and Hermia, who flee Athens in an attempt to escape the unfair marriage laws placed upon them. They are pursued through an enchanted wood by Hermia's other suitor, Demetrius, and the woman who loves him, Helena. The four Athenians stumble into a lover's quarrel between the king and queen of the fairies, Oberon and Titania. Oberon tasks his trickster henchman, Puck, with placing magical charms on Titania and one of the Athenians. Unfortunately, Puck mistakenly charms the wrong man, and chaos ensues. All the while, a troupe of actors is preparing their production of Pyramus and Thisbe for Theseus' wedding. After observing the troupe for a bit, Puck decides to transform one of the actors' heads into that of a donkey. The actor, you see, was behaving like an ass. The trick is made more hilarious when Titania, while under Oberon's love spell, falls in love with the donkey-headed actor. In the end, all is resolved, and the royal wedding is changed to a triple one. The festivities close after the troupe's performance, and once again, the fairies are given the night to celebrate on their own. The characters of A Midsummer Night's Dream go through a variety of transformations, both literal and figurative. They encounter other characters in unique ways as fantasy meets reality. This makes the play both entertaining and thought-provoking, which is why it attracts audiences, actors, and readers of all walks of life. So let's start with an introduction to our characters. The first main group are known as the Athenian lovers. Quite a spicy group. Lysander is in love with Hermia, and Hermia is in love with Lysander. A perfect setup. However, Demetrius is also in love with Hermia, but she just thinks he's alright. Hermia's father, Aegeus, loves Demetrius and thinks Lysander isn't good enough for his daughter. Hermia and Helena are best friends. Helena is in love with Demetrius, but he wants nothing to do with her. This makes Helena understandably sad. Theseus, as the Duke of Athens, has to deal with this nonsense when he would rather be preparing for his wedding to Hippolyta. And if this whole love triangle or love tangle wasn't enough, enter the fairies. Oberon is king of the fairies, and he wants his way all of the time. Titania is his wife, and she doesn't want to give him his way. Puck is Oberon's mischievous henchman that puts magic love potion on all the eyes, most of them wrong. Titania also has some henchmen: Peas Blossom, Cobweb, Moth, and Mustard Seed. They hardly talk at all. And just for extra laughs, we have the Mechanicals. They're the acting troupe that's preparing a play for Theseus' wedding. Peter Quince is the leader and writer of the troupe. He tries to keep everyone in line. Bottom is the lead actor, and he thinks he should play all of the parts. Puck decides to give him a donkey head and have Titania fall in love with him. Flute, Snug, Snout, and Starveling are also there. So that covers the basics of the plot and characters, but before we move on to the actual text of the play, we have some important context to cover: fairy lore. The idea of fairies was well known to the people of the English countryside. Their magic was used to explain a variety of everyday odd occurrences. However, they were much different than the fairies we picture today. They weren't tiny, glowing people with wings. They came in a variety of shapes and sizes because fairy lore evolved from stories and myths told all around Europe. Like any lore, it evolved out of a need to explain the unexplainable. It can be difficult to pinpoint exactly when and where the stories of fairies started. We can find traces of fairy stories in Greek, Roman, and Norse mythology, but they weren't called fairies. They were referred to as nymphs, elves, and even a few minor gods. Celtic mythology also provides a wide base of creatures that fall into the umbrella category of fairies. All sorts of sprites, spirits, and creatures slowly became known as fairies. This happened as Christianity spread across Europe. These pagan spirits and gods were demoted to the category of fairy, so they couldn't compete with the God of Christian belief. Sometimes fairies were even associated with the devil to discourage people from trying to appease or work with the fairies. In the end, Purkiss, gnomes, elves, banshees, and more all became known as fairies. Eventually, any being that possessed magical abilities was referred to as a fairy. Because fairy stories were sampled from such a wide variety of myths from across Europe, fairies come in all shapes and sizes. Some are tiny, but many are human-sized. Most don't have wings, but some can. Many can transform into different forms in order to trick humans. Some are ethereal and beautiful, while others are completely grotesque. Fairies also have a wide range of personality types. Some are good, some are evil, some can be a little bit of both. People would often provide small offerings of food or other items to appease the fairies, because they could be offended if you didn't thank them in the right way. If they were offended, they could either play small tricks or make life extremely difficult. Fairy magic was used to explain a lot of everyday experiences, from people suddenly becoming disinterested in a hobby to sickly children. It was said that fairies would steal healthy human children and switch them with old or sick fairies. These were known as changelings. Typically, if a couple has a child who is weak or sickly, they would assume it was a changeling. Diane Purkiss, in her book At the Bottom of the Garden, asserts that this lore was an expression of a woman's fear of her abilities as a mother, or lack thereof. Infants were frequently abused or left in the woods in the hopes that the fairies would return the real baby. In the play, Titania and Oberon fight over a human child that Titania has decided to care for after his mother passed. The child is referred to as a changeling, but it's worth noting that this description differs entirely from traditional lore. Fairies have their own societal structure as well. Much like Renaissance England, there was a class structure among the social or trooping fairies. These fairies lived apart from our world and lived in a fairy court. They served the king and queen of the fairies, in this play Oberon and Titania, although it's worth noting that Oberon and Titania were not universally acknowledged as the king and queen of the fairies. In fact, most other fairy stories use different names. There is no consensus. The fairy court functioned much like Elizabeth's court, where they enjoyed banquets complete with singing and dancing. Elizabeth was sometimes referred to as the Fairy Queen, a nickname she seemed to embrace, if not perpetuate. Fairies entered our world at specific times or through specific areas. One such area is a fairy ring. These were circles created by a type of mushroom in the forest, and were believed to be where the fairies celebrated their feast. Nighttime was supposed to be the time that fairies had the most power in our world. Additionally, there were times of year when the veil between the fairy world and ours was at its thinnest. One such time is mid to late June, when the people of England would celebrate the longest day of summer, known as Midsummer Day or summer solstice. The night before, Midsummer Eve, was supposed to be a particularly active time for the fairies and was celebrated with feasting and bonfires. So this is the festival that titles our play, and with that, we're ready to move on to summarizing the text. In the next video, we'll take a look at Act 1. If you want to make sure you don't miss that or any future videos, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Comment down below with any thoughts or questions you have about Midsummer or Shakespeare in general. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up. For more Shakespeare fun, check out my blog at ripegoodscholar.com or hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at ripegoodscholar. See you next time, and remember, go wisely and go slowly. Those who rush stumble and fall.